All right. Hello, everyone. I am back. Thank you to those of you who are here already. Alonzo, um, Ray Alexander, thank you for being here. I just was a little late getting started, had to get a few things together, and but I'm here. So we're gonna start. Um, Let me see. Yeah, I just had to get a few more things together. So I'm gonna play the intro, and then I will jump in. This is gonna be a fun one. This is one is gonna be a bit of a revisit and a revisit of a topic that was very, very popular, and that still is very, very popular on this channel, which is my smallest channel. I'm not going to debate anyone on assortative mating or whether or not I should get a luxury car or whatever. This is going to be just another look back at the masterpiece that is our kind of people inside America's Black upper class by the late Lawrence Otis Graham. And one thing I noticed about, or I thought about regarding the pre record that I did about 3 years ago, is that I didn't really talk about Mr. Graham, but we're going to learn a bit about Mr. Graham himself as I get into the book itself. So I'll see you on the other side of the introduction. Ray Alexander, I've got all your vocabulary words and all those things down. But assortative mating is right there at the top. Assortative or assortive? It must be assortative. I don't think assortative is a word. Okay, I'll see you on the other side of the intro. Hopefully, some more folks roll through. This is an important topic. It's a bit of Black history. It's it definitely is woven into my story. It definitely deals with current events, and yeah, as I'll describe my review of this video, for whatever reason on this channel, I think it's the most popular video on this channel. So we'll discuss it. See you soon.
That's good.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Big Discussions 76 Entertainment and Media. First of all, please like the stream, please share it, and please subscribe to the channel if you see fit. If you want to make a donation, if you're watching on the playback, like my science channel, I don't have AdSense over here. Thank you to Shonda and whoever else subscribed to this channel. It's funny. This channel, this channel and my science channel are opposites. So I've monetized my original channel, I've monetized my sports channel. On my science channel, I have over 1,000 subscribers, but I don't have the watch hours. Okay. And that's a challenge for, I think, for that topic area. Over here, right now, I'm sitting at 400 subscribers, and I probably have the watch hours in large part due to my uh, uh, our kind of people review from a couple of years ago. So it's YouTubing is not an easy thing to monetize the channel itself. Of course, you can always get donations, but you want the AdSense and you want people to be able to super chat you or leave super thankses. But it's not easy. So sometimes you have one, but not the other. So if you watched the intro, it was, and I need to change it. I need to update it. There just isn't enough time. I was working my 9 to 5 today, and I was thinking I don't want to use the same intro, but there just wasn't time to put together a new one. So that's on the long to-do list. So if you watch that intro, you could see that this channel has a media theme. That's why I called it entertainment and media, because I like movies and TV shows, and I have favorite characters, and I grew up watching Transformers and GI Joe and Star Wars and Star Trek and all those different things. So that's the theme of the channel. But when I started, I've been doing a lot of cinema and TV shows recently. But when I started this channel, I was also doing writings, some of which I think at one point I read some of my own essays, and I also have read passages from books. And so everything is media: books, articles, essays, TV shows, documentaries, and movies. All of that is fair game here. Speaking of documentaries, I hear that that Cleopatra documentary produced by Jada Pinkett Smith is not doing really well. So anyway, that's a different topic for a different day. So a revisit of our kind of people inside of America's Black upper class by Lawrence Otis Graham. I Right now that video has 9,000 views. I mean, it's been up for about 2 to 3 years. So, but the thing about being a YouTube content creator is that when you have your backstage, and I think the guys in the chat know this, when you have your backstage, you can see what people are watching within the last 48 hours and how many views a particular offering has gotten within the last 48 hours. And I've done things on the Avengers, I've done things on Snowfall, I've done things on um, Mahershala Ali sending the script back for the Blade movie. I've done all that. I remembered Kirstie Alley. I've done all of that. And there's more to do. But what happens eventually is my review of Our Kind of People, it creeps back up onto the leaderboard, which means somebody is still finding it and somebody is still watching it. So I decided, well, let's do a revisit of it, 2 years later, and let's talk about why that's important, and let me add some thoughts onto it. So let's take a quick look at that that video. That video is a good for the new YouTube content creators out there. If you're just getting started or if you're thinking about starting, that video is a good study on content creation, and I'm going to explain why. I'm going to my backstage right now. I'm going to show this here. Let's see, videos. That was a pre-record. Okay, bear with me, everyone, while I call up the data. All right, that was July 27th, 2020. So we were right in the heart of the pandemic, and we're coming up on the 3-year anniversary of that video. So that video right now, I'm going to try to blow this up for you all. Yep, you all should be able to see that. That video, and that first year was just for this channel, as with a lot of channels, it's just throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks. So that video, as of now, has 9,347 views. I don't, well, I'm sure people have watched, I'm sure a significant number of people have watched through to the end, but it's got that many views, which it is nothing compared to some of the bigger channels. But for this channel, that's a lot of views. It got 238 likes and 15 dislikes. Okay. So this is the top performer on this channel, I believe. Now here's the other fun part, the commenters. I've said this lots of times. One of the most exciting parts of YouTubing is the commenters. One of the hardest parts of YouTubing are the commenters. So this one got 60 comments. I think 2 to 3 of these are mine. I think I thanked quite a few people, but some people some people have said some really nasty things to me, some commenters about this. When I shot this, I was still a relatively new YouTuber. My production quality wasn't very high. It just I was a much younger YouTuber. I hadn't perfected my sauce yet. And some people said some really nasty things underneath this video. Some people said some good things. Some people thanked me for making this. So when you create content and it gets a lot of views, you're probably going to get some thumbs up and some thumbs down. And you're going to get some people who are going to sing your praises. And you're going to get some people who may say some nasty things to you. So this is a new comment. I've never seen this one before. This was left 6 hours ago. This is from Dennis Boner. I'm not going to read all these. He says, I never read this. He said, old white guy here. I knew of this class divide for a long time. It was easily observed by the machinations of the elite blacks, which appeared identical to the same maneuvers the elites of every other segment use, regardless of where they came from. Your elites are no worse than the rest in rejecting others. They isolate so they do not directly compete with the others. It distinguishes them as betters within their limited communities. They may have some residual noblesse oblige, but mostly they want to be social climbers in a protected space. Okay, so that one's new. I haven't responded to that one, but let's take a look at some of the others. Okay, that's me. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Snow Brownie said, "Thank you for sharing. I only found and bought this book a few years ago because my ex-boyfriend uh, came from a seemingly well-to-do Black family, and I felt like I couldn't understand why they lived and acted the way they did. His mother came from a poor family in West Virginia, and his paternal grandfather was a very prominent preacher in the Camden area. Everything I read in this book ended up acting like a checklist that they were following to the letter. Jack and Jill, check. Vacation at Martha's Vineyard, check. HBCUs, check. favoring light-skinned Black people, while all their figurines and household decor depicted very dark-skinned Black folk. Check. It was definitely a new world that I stumbled upon. LOL. Okay. Um, let's see. This person says, I'm bourgeoisie and damn proud of it, but I'm unapologetically Black. I'm a serious professional and a trader, so I could easily integrate myself within the community if I choose to. Most of the Black upper class owe their economic viability to whites that pay their salaries. I don't really have anything in common with them because they do tend to go, they do tend to be go along, get along types for economic reasons. They seem slave minded to me, and I definitely want to pledge raising my son to be unapologetic, economically successful, raising my son to be an unapologetic, economically successful Black man with a serious understanding of real Black history. Okay. Sheet, I'm looking for one of the nasty ones. Uh, let's see. There's extended clips thanking me for this. Okay. Well, there have been a lot of readers of this. Um, okay. Well, what I'm seeing here is mostly positive. But you know what they say? They say the one. Okay, here we go. Can you stop talking about yourself and talk about the book? Come on, bro. Okay. Um, these super 29127 says these same Black people that would vote for Trump for the wrong reasons and vote for Biden and Democrats like Kamala, who has done nothing but uh, defecate on Black people. And these are the same types of people who do not support reparations. Usually they are cowards, Black folks that do not support their community and will do anything to not be Black. Okay, well, you know what they say? They say the one bad comment that you get, those few, those are the ones that stand out to you the most. So most of those were positive, and that one guy said, "Stop talking about yourself and just talk about the book." Okay, so there we are. Anyway, anyway, this this resonated with a lot of people, and I when I think about it, it must have something to do with why it resonated with me. And the reason this book resonated with me is because I did not know about it. I did not know about any of this growing up. Okay. So let's start with some, and I only tend to go for about an hour unless the crowd gets bigger and some folks want to come up. Well, let's talk a little bit about Black history. I was thinking about Black history before I started this stream. Black history is broad, Black history is huge. Unfortunately, we only hear certain parts of it during Black History Month, and we only hear about certain people during Black History Month. And maybe in the churches you grew up in, you only heard about Dr. Martin Luther King and Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth and Frederick Douglass, who are all important people, but there are so many other people. And the reality is, and we're seeing this now, we're seeing this in the YouTube streets, we're seeing this in society. Not all Black people are the same. I'm sure you've heard the saying, we're not a monolith. Well, that's true. You have Democratic Blacks, you have Republican Blacks, you have uh, upper class Blacks, you have middle class Blacks, you have more hood, street Black people. You have attorneys, and bus drivers. You have clergymen and gym teachers. You have all kinds of things. You have architects. You have plumbers, insurance professionals, jacks of all trades. You got all kinds of things. So despite what you see on TV and in the news, depending upon which station that you watch, there's a lot of variability in within foundational Black America, whatever you want to call us, the descendants of slaves. And that's one of the things that I stressed in this particular essay here. Whose job is it to teach Black history? I wrote this a couple of years ago, and I think one of the points of this essay, I haven't read over it. I've written a lot of content. Is just what I said, is that our history is broad and it's it's broad and it's not restricted to the usual individuals that you see celebrated during Black History Month. And I think the other argument I made in this essay was that I think that it can't be left to the school systems to teach it. Okay, there's just so much of it. There's in K through 12, there's probably not time to teach all of it. So I think that our people need to be uh, teaching this and passing this on and not rely on the school systems to do it. Okay, so that's one essay. That's one essay. Where did I start to learn about the quote unquote upper class? And where did I start to learn about affluent, quote unquote, affluent Black people? Well, it actually started earlier in my life. It started in my hometown of Buffalo, New York. And I've said numerous times that I come from very, very humble and modest beginnings. And I think that's been part of my journey in becoming, quote unquote, Dr. Dunbar and becoming highly educated and earning a terminal degree, as Eboni Williams said in her discussion with Ayanla. Uh, I probably came from a lower middle class family. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich either. And so this is my book project, The Engineers, a Western New York basketball story. It's about a lot of things. It's a sports story. It's about a lot of things. But in a part of the story, me and a classmate and a teammate who I was once very, very tight with, we started off on the team together as sophomores. And that year, I think we both predicted that we would finish up on the team together. Well, to make a long story short, we didn't. And then in my senior year, I saw him at school in the hallways, and he started going on and on and on about being a part of a battalion. Yeah, I'm hanging out with guys from my battalion. I'm part of a battalion, a battalion, a battalion, a battalion. And he said this to me over and over again. And I remember thinking, what's a battalion? Well, a battalion is the opposite of a cotillion. I'm sure Ray Alexander could tell us all about that. Well, basically, what those are is for quote unquote upper class, the Black upper class or upper middle class families, people who are connected with the Divine Nine. Those are rite of passage ceremonies. So a cotillion for girls and a battalion for boys. And it's an early pipeline into the Divine Nine fraternities and sororities, but also it's a coming out. It's a rite of passage for those kids, which is why you see those are normally sponsored by the Divine Nine. fraternities, and sororities. For those watching this who don't know who the Divine Nine are, please keep shouting yourselves out in the chat, letting me know what you think. Let me see if I have a picture here of the Divine Nine. Well, I thought I did. I have these two. These are both, well, one's from our kind of people, one is not. This is a debutante ball. That's a picture of a debutante ball. Okay. And we had 2 to 3 black newspapers in Buffalo. One is the Challenger, one is the Criterion, and in every spring, you'd see debutantes being presented to the world by either AKA, the local chapters of AKA, or Delta Sigma Theta. I think it was AKA. I know one year, I went to school with one of the girls, but what was a debutante? What was that? I heard something about it on TV, but because my family wasn't connected with that and we weren't into that, I didn't really know what that was. This is a picture from the front of Our Kind of People, Inside of America's Black Upper Class by Lawrence Otis Graham. That's probably at a debutante ball or some sort of formal for kids who grew up in Jack and Jill, or kids who will go on to be a part of the Divine Nine, or kids from quote unquote old guard black families, which is how Lawrence Otis Graham refers to them oftentimes in the book. So that was one of my first exposures to this. Other exposures were from Spike Lee's School Days. Some exposure came from The Cosby Show. How many of you all remember The Cosby Show? I mean, you remember it, but part of the argument over The Cosby Show was whether or not that family was real, or whether or not there were families like the Huxtables, where the father was a medical doctor and the mother was a lawyer, and they live in a nice brownstone in Brooklyn. Was that real? Were the Huxtables real? Well, it depends on where you were from. If you were in that type of family, then the Huxtables were real. If you came from the east side of Buffalo, or from Compton, or from Overtown in Miami, or West Charlotte, the Huxtables were not real, but it depends upon where you came from, because there were families like that. I have a new comment here. Isada, thank you for stopping through. So the Huxtables, depending upon where you came from, they were real. An offshoot or spinoff from The Cosby Show was A Different World at Hillman College. For a lot of us, that was, well, for me, it was a second exposure to the Black college world. My first exposure was School Days. And I think Spike came under criticism for how he portrayed Black colleges in School Days. So A Different World was another look at this world, because there were individuals on the show pledging fraternities and sororities. That was another exposure. I've said in my content that my father pledged Omega Sci-Fi grad. But he wasn't a your typical member of the Purple and Gold, and for most of my life, he wasn't financially active in it, which is why I didn't get a lot of exposure to that growing up. Okay, so he was in that, and I do have memories as a youth on a visit seeing him and some of his frat brothers step in the park. But again, I didn't get a lot of exposure to it, and I didn't really get encouragement from him to join when I went to undergrad. It was just focus on your schoolwork. Don't be up all night with doing what those guys are doing late at night. Everyone, give me a second, all right? I'll be right back. You can see this picture of our kind of people. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. So that was exposure to it. My cousin, I have a cousin who went to the University of Georgia. Everyone, hold on for 1 second. I see the equalizer has entered the building, and there was a point I wanted to bring up from one of our discussions from earlier regarding uh, the percentages. So I had a cousin at the University of Georgia who pledged Sigma Gamma Rho. We only saw her once a year, so there wasn't a lot of talk about what that was, why it was important to join, and what exactly all went into that. What was the significance of joining a Divine Nine fraternity or sorority? So that was kind of exposure to it as well. I already described the debutantes being revealed or being presented in two of our Black newspapers in Buffalo. So there were elements of these things all around growing. I'm not muted right now, but there were elements of all these things growing up around, but unless you're plugged into them, you don't really know what they are or why they are important. And that's what I would say about my exposure to these things. My first year of college, I remember at Brockport, I remember there was a Alpha line. I remember seeing some of the guys running around the campus late at night, um, doing whatever it is they do to pledge at Brockport. At JC Smith, when I got there, the queues they were suspended. Everyone, I'll be right back. I am doing some pet sitting, and when you're pet sitting, sometimes things get a little chaotic. All right, where was I? When I got to Johnson C. Smith University, my HBCU in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Qs, they were suspended, probably for whipping on somebody, probably for beating somebody down late at night to pledge their fraternity. I think all the other uh, fraternities were still active, but I know that they were suspended when I got there. I think the AKAs were suspended when I got there, probably for beating somebody down or abusing someone, some poor girl or some poor girls to get into their sorority. I'm not here to disparage AKA, but there are stories of all kinds in the news. There have been even in the last 10 years about so so partway through, one of my suite mates was the DP of a Sigma line. For those of you who don't know, DP stands for Dean of Pledgees. And he asked me if I wanted to be down. And my mentality was just to focus on my schoolwork. Just focus on your schoolwork. And I wonder if I had gone that route, would I have had the grades to go to Michigan? Okay. So those were my exposures to it. It looked like those kids had a lot of fun in college. And I remember one of my science professors, Dr. Errol Thompson. I don't know if he's still with us. I remember him saying, yeah, they can pledge those organizations, but when they get out into the professional world, it's not going to make much difference. It's not going to help them. And I was thinking about that. I think to some extent, those fraternity and sorority connections may help professionally, but I know for sure they help socially. Okay. So what I've observed is that when you get out into the working world and you move to a new city, it's not necessarily easy to make friends. It's not necessarily easy to form a social circle. But if you're a part of one of those organizations, I might have to close Facebook down here. If you're a part of one of those organizations, you have, well, assuming you like the people in your chapter, you have a built-in community. You have built-in friends. You have built-in events to go to. So no, those things might not help you professionally, especially if you're a scientist, but socially, I from the outside looking in, I can see that those organizations pay lots and lots of dividends. Now, one of the flip sides to them is it costs money to pledge, and also there are annual dues to pay. Okay. And some folks become what's called non-financial, okay, where they're not paying their dues and then they're not current in their dues. And that's when you see these organizations um, having these reclamation projects. And what reclamation projects are is the organizations are going back and trying to bring people back in to be financial. Okay. So I didn't mean to make this a Divine Nine talk, but as I'm looking back, I'm thinking about all this. At Michigan, at the University of Michigan, most of you know I got my science training at the University of Michigan. It was really good science training. It was top tier science training, but there was no social training there. It was all mostly science. And my graduate advisor, who was Asian American, I wrote this in an essay. Well, he had three young children. His wife was white, and they had a nice house in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is it costs money to stay there. And I noticed that he drove the same older Subaru station wagon. I noticed that he wore sneakers until they were well, He wore sneakers until they were well past their prime. Let me just say that so I don't get myself in trouble. And I noticed that. I noticed when he came to lab, he wore jeans and a polo shirt every day or a t-shirt. So it was very informal. Okay. And he allowed us to call him by his first name. That's abnormal. Most people get their PhDs, especially in our ethnic group. Most people want to be called doctor. And then once you ascend in that education, you probably don't want to be seen wearing sneakers that are past their prime. And you probably don't want to be seen driving an older Subaru station wagon. Okay. So I'm saying this to say that when I was there getting my top tier science training, the other parts weren't filled in, the social parts, knowing and understanding what fine dining is. And may he rest in power, the image guy, Kevin Samuels, for that brief period that I did work with him. We did have that discussion at his 2019 Men in Dallas training. Dr. Dunbar, you don't know what fine dining is? Well, if your family doesn't grow up eating at Ruth Chris, or I think in Buffalo, our big steakhouse is Russell's Steakhouse. If you don't grow up eating that, eating, ordering a protein and then ordering your sides a la carte, kicking out $200 to $300 on dinner, if you don't grow up doing that, and the mentality is being frugal and saving money, that's what your mentality is, even if you get a PhD. Okay. And that was one of the adjustments, one of the many adjustments in moving to Washington, D.C. Because here, you kind of need to look the part and play the part as well. My first year at Michigan, my first year at Michigan, we had a Black student union called SCORE, the Students of Color of Rackham. And I remember the first meeting. After a while in the sciences, you stop going. But I remember that first meeting, our president, the president of SCORE, the Students of Color of Rackham, these were all your Black graduate students, whether you were in pharmacology or African American studies or philosophy or uh, whatever. That first meeting, our president, I think it was Shavella. I'll just say Shavella. I won't say her last name. I remember she said, "We're going to do an outing with the members of the Black Business School Union, student union. I don't know what they're called." And I remember it was a joke. She smiled. She says, "And we know how our brothers and sisters in the business school are." And then you heard someone in the back yell out, "Bougie." Okay. I didn't understand at the time, but now I can look back and say, okay, yeah, well, they were in the business school. And being in the business school, there's a culture over there. And they probably walk a certain way, and they talk a certain way, and they comport themselves in a certain way because they're in the business school. Just like the Black students in the law school probably walk a certain way, talk a certain way, and comport themselves a certain way. Salchi laughed there. Salchi laughed. But that isn't that fascinating, Salchi, that even there at the University of Michigan, where you have all these graduate students going to get masters and PhDs, they're looking at the Black business students as bougie. It's funny how that all works. Even at that high level of education, there are little divisions. When did I first hear bougie? I don't know when I first heard bougie, but I know in recent times when I've heard it. Well, it was all throughout some of the rap music. It was all throughout some of Public Enemy's music. It was all throughout some of KRS One's music. It was all throughout. Um, the hip hop was very conscious in the late 1980s and early 1990s. So class and culture was talked about often in the music, in the hip hop music in the 80s, the late 80s and the early 1990s, before Puffy and Biggie started making it all about money and blinging. So I heard about it there. Back in Buffalo, when I go home, you hear about it there too. I'm thinking about one auntie whose daughter is a school principal. She's an AKA also. And her mother always refers to her as Bougie. She's bougie. She doesn't want to help anybody out. She's bougie. Well, what does that mean? Why would she be bougie? Well, the reality is when you go ahead and get some education, when you get a terminal degree, shout out to Ebony Williams talking to Ayanla. I think they're both AKAs too. Once your education is not just a piece of paper, there's also a culture that comes along with that. There's an expected culture that comes along with that. Not everyone who gets a master's or a PhD leaves the hood behind. There's a lot of content on YouTube about that. But getting your degree is not just a piece of paper. There's a culture that comes with it if you weren't raised in that culture. Okay. So what does all this have to do with our kind of people inside of America's Black upper class? Well, for me, I think the book was a masterpiece. Rest in power, Lawrence Otis Graham. But while my parents encouraged going to college, they weren't privy to any of this. Well, my dad, as I said, my dad was in a fraternity grad chapter, but he wasn't active, and he didn't encourage me to participate. But all these other things, fine, fine dining, driving luxury cars, getting nice tailored suits, vacationing in Idlewild or Martha's Vineyard. Oh, that's another place I got exposure to this was in movies like The Inkwell with Lorenz Tate and Dwayne Martin and uh, uh, who played the bougie father? That was Glenn Turman. He played the bougie father. That's in cinema. It was shown in cinema. But as much as college was encouraged in my family, these other parts, yeah, no mention of them because my people did not know because we came from humble beginnings. So that they didn't know about all the other parts that come with becoming highly educated. All right. So how did I find out about our kind of people inside of America's Black upper class? Well, it was the late 1990s. I was at my HBCU, Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was sitting in my room, in my suite, and Tavis Smiley was on. And Lawrence Otis Graham had just published Our Kind of People, and he was on there arguing with Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. As you might expect, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson took umbrage with celebrating high class Black America, the old guard, the Black elite. Michael Eric Dyson didn't take too kindly to that. And so I said, you know what, that book looks kind of interesting. So as a reader myself, I didn't run out and get it, but I eventually went and got a copy and I read it and I said, wow, this is interesting. There are kids growing up in Jack and Jill. There's something called a boule. There's something called the Lynx. Uh, there are Black yacht clubs. There are right churches. There are doctor crowds. There are old guard Black families. These are all things that are talked about in the book. The Divine Nine are discussed in there as well. but also the Boule and the Lynx and there are so many there's so many moving parts and so many sectors and so many groups in that world that if you don't know that they're there, you're none the wiser. And then when you move from Buffalo or from somewhere in Kentucky or somewhere to an NFL city, you you either figure that out, and if you want to gain entry, you figure out how to gain entry. But most of the time, they're not just going to let you in. You have to earn your way in somehow. Tasha Ray, thank you for stopping through. She says, debutantes. Yep, I talked about that as well in Buffalo. I saw debutantes in our two black newspapers, and I didn't know what that was because we didn't grow up in that. We didn't go to a church where there were debutantes, where there were cotillions or batillions, or even where there were Divine Nine members. We didn't go to that type of church. So Lawrence Otis Graham thought it was important to present this to the world. So who is Lawrence Otis Graham? So Lawrence Otis Graham, I was familiar with him when I saw him on Tavis Smiley because I had already read one of his books. So he also wrote this one, The Invisible Man. So I think in this one, his mission was to infiltrate a golf club, a non-integrated golf club, and see what the culture is like and see how they perceive black people. I didn't read this one, but this was one of his books. But I did go to the Buffalo Public Library on a visit home, and I pulled this one, Member of the Club, Reflections on Life in a Racially Polarized World. Now, the interesting thing about Mr. Graham, if you look at that picture, and he talks about this in the book, Mr. Graham got a nose job. He got his nose done. And he talks about that in the book. So I'm not saying he disliked being black, but for some reason, he saw fit to get a nose job. And he actually talked about in the book what it was like being at some colleges where some of the black kids didn't want to identify as black. They didn't want to date other black kids. They wanted to date their white classmates. Let's see. Alonzo Hall says, Dr. Dunbar, I don't know if you know who Adrienne Nash is. I do not. But she's around these YouTube streets and with the lead attorney often. And she was a debutante daughter. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating when you come from humble beginnings where no one's talking about this and you realize that there are people who are living this way and growing up this way and occupy and operating as adults in this way. So that this is a culture. This is a way of being. This is a segment and a sector of society. And again, the assumption, if you don't know that this exists, you assume all black people are the same. But we know that's not true. That's not true. No. Now, I'm going to read who Mr. Graham is. He passed away, and I'm going to talk about some highlights from the book, and then I'm going to wrap this up, unless someone wants to come up and say a few words. But this is intertwined with the recent controversy with Miss Williams and Miss Van Zandt. When you get into these circles, these are people who believe in the talented 10th, and these are people who believe that they were put there to lead the entire race, and they're put there to provide leadership for the rest of the race. So this is yeah, we're not, as Malcolm Gladwell says, my hero, we're not just playing games here. This is a real thing. And I've heard that, the talented 10th, the talented 10th, the talented 10th. When you go to the Congressional Black Caucus annual legislative conference, these are those people. These are people who are being positioned to be in the Democratic Party. These are people who are being positioned to become senator or White House something or other. These people don't show up out of nowhere. They're groomed early and they're picked. That's true. That's true. And I don't want to speculate on whether or not there's a quote unquote overseer class, but well, that's been discussed in the YouTube streets as well. So Lawrence Otis Graham felt the need to bring this to the mainstream. A couple of years ago on Twitter, there was a picture of Mr. Graham and his family. It might have been right after he died, but Black Twitter was making fun of him. It was a picture. It's like they took a picture in their lawn, on their lawn. Him and his sons are wearing suits. His wife and his daughters, they're wearing dresses. It's a very eloquent looking picture. But I kept thinking, why are these people dragging this family? Why are they dragging these people? And it turned out it was Lawrence Otis Graham. So who was Lawrence Otis Graham? Salchi, that's correct. I agree with that. This is one of the main themes of my story, my book. Your childhood environment and subculture sets the trajectory for your life. Yeah, you don't have to stay fixed there, but your start and what you're exposed to early, what you have access to early, has an impact on your journey. And anyone who tells you otherwise is blowing smoke. And this is no. I'm rereading. I reread a part of Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, and in that chapter discussing Chris Langan and Robert Oppenheimer, he concludes the same thing. No one gets to a place on their own, and your early life circumstances matter. They matter. Ray Alexander says, yeah, we're going to get to this in this piece, right? He says Lawrence Otis Graham grew up in New York City's Black upper middle class, whereas Michael Eric Dyson grew up in working class blue collar Detroit. Yep. A clash was bound to happen between them. Yep. And it was entertaining too. Okay. Lawrence Otis Graham. Who was Lawrence Otis Graham? Ray Alexander just gave some of it away. So Lawrence Otis Graham was born in 1961 and he lived until 2021. So he survived. Well, it looks like he survived the pandemic. Activist for ethnic and intellectual diversity, author, and attorney, Lawrence Otis Graham was born December 25th, 1961, in New York City. Ray Alexander knows his stuff. He was born to Richard C. Graham, a real estate developer, and Betty J. Graham, a social worker. He and his brother Richard were reared in Mount Vernon and later in White Plains, New York. As a child, Graham first experienced bigotry in 1972 when a white parent removed her child from a pool he waded in. An excellent student and tennis team member, Graham graduated from White Plains High School in 1979. At Princeton, he earned an English BA in 1983 and a Harvard Law School JD in 1988. These darn terminal degrees. Graham met Detroit, Michigan native Pamela Thomas at Harvard, where she graduated Phi Beta Kappa and magna cum laude in 1985 with a BA in economics. At St. Thomas Episcopal Church in New York City, they married on February 15th, 1992, and later had children, Gordon, Harrison, and Lindsay. Employed by prestigious law firms, including New York City's Weil, Gottschall, and Mangus and Cuddy and Fetter, Graham had a personal connection with the latter from his youth as a family friend. Despite his academic and professional credentials, Graham in 1991 took a job earning a minimum wage as a busboy to examine systemic racism in the predominantly white Greenwich Country Club. This experiment led to his career explaining racism in upper class settings. Eventually, he left the law profession to become a full-time writer which allowed him to examine this continuing problem despite widespread claims of racial progress. Throughout the rest of his career, Graham studied the impact of race on social class identity and its subsequent divisions within the African American community, regardless of individual achievement and wealth. So it sounds like he wanted those golf courses integrated. That's a joke. Graham authored 14 books, including Perversity, A Member of the Club, Reflections on Life in a Racially Polarized World, Our Kind of People Inside America's Black Upper Class, a New York Times bestseller, and The Senator and the Socialite, The True Story of America's First Black Dynasty. Our Kind of People proved to be Graham's most important and enduring work. In 2019, C-SPAN's Book TV showcased it to commemorate the 20th anniversary publication. Two, Fox TV planned a primetime drama series around the book. Graham was also a political commentator for multiple media outlets and a contributing editor for Reader's Digest. Graham served on various boards, such as Westchester County, New York's Holocaust Commission, Police Board, and Red Cross SUNY Purchase College Foundation, University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine, American Theater Wing, Eagle Brook School, and the Horace Mann School. A member of Sigma Pi Phi fraternity, the oldest African American fraternity. Lawrence Otis Graham died at 59 in Chappaqua, New York on February 19th, 2021 of an unknown cause. Everyone, I just learned something. So Sigma Pi Phi, I'm not going to say who's ever heard of Sigma Pi Phi, but usually when you think of Black fraternities, you think of Alpha Phi Alpha, Omega Psi Phi, Phi Beta Sigma, Kappa Alpha Psi, and even though some folks don't always associate them, Iota Phi Theta. Oh, see, Shonda, see, there you go. So it seems that the Boule predates the others. See, we always learn something here. Okay, I've talked for an hour. So that's Mr. Graham. And I remember bringing home Member of the Club from the library. And my stepfather at the time, who was a bit of an activist, a bit of a Black activist, he kind of just, this is just another one of those upper class guys trying to celebrate. Da, 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 da. So these communities are real. This is a distinct subculture within Black America, but they are looked upon with suspicion from the other parts of the race. Why is that? Well, I wrote this essay, and I'm going to wrap this up shortly. If anyone wants to come up and say something, I'll drop the link for a few minutes, but I won't go too long. When I updated this essay, I wrote this essay on my first blog. I highlighted this quote. This is called A Discussion on Economic and Social Class in the Black Community. I love that picture of those six teens. I mean, that's a very different scene than what I grew up in Buffalo. So that looks really, really cool to have gone to something like that as a young person. But I lifted this quote right out of one of the early chapters of the book. And Graham wrote, even though it was 1968, a period of unrest for many Blacks throughout the country, great-grandmother like the blue veined crowd that she was proud to belong to, seemed at times to be totally divorced from the Black anxiety and misery that we saw on TV news and in the papers. Well, that probably underscores the suspicion other parts of Black America look at these people with, because they see themselves, many see themselves as different, and that they're above, and that they're better than the rest of the race. And his grandmother, he wrote that his grandmother was very adamant about him not staying in the sun too long. Him and his brother not staying in the sun too long because they get too dark. So that's that brown paper bag thing. That thing is real. That thing is real. I don't know how prevalent it is today, but for that generation, it was real. A few things from the book, and then I will finish up. One of the big things from the book that I gleaned was that money, it wasn't just money. It wasn't just about money. And a few weeks ago, I huddled up on my original channel with Salchi and Alonzo and Sheed to talk about money. And Salchi gave a very, very eloquent description of what a 10 percenter is, what a 1 percenter is, and what a 0.1 percenter is, and what a 0.01 percenter is. Well, in our kind of people, it is clearly stated that just because you're rich, just because you're an athlete, just because you're an entertainer, or some sort of celebrity with notoriety, that doesn't mean you are a part of the group. That does not mean you are accepted. I thought that was so fascinating, because the rest of us, the rest of society, we look at celebrities and entertainers and athletes. Well, well, the celebrity worship in this country is probably sick, but and excessive. But these people are saying, no, you're not necessarily one of us because you have a lot of money, because you can dunk a ball or catch a football, or you can twerk on stage, or you can sell out Coachella. You're not necessarily one of us. I thought that was powerful. I don't think I don't think in the book they also, I don't think they looked favorably upon Colin Powell, if I recall correctly. In the book, they didn't look favorably upon him, and if I recall correctly, they didn't accept Oprah either. I remember, I think Dr. Cosby's name came up, but I don't remember what they said about him. But I do know that there were, yeah, there were celebrities who, highly respected celebrities, highly sought after celebrities, who were not accepted into the group because it's not just about having money. It's about their history. It's about their culture. It's about their way of life. Sheet, are you referring to Colin Powell? Okay, so Shonda, that means it's been a while since I read the book from front to back. I do remember his name mentioned, so he was he was accepted in there. Okay. Um, and there were distinct crowds. That's a doctor crowd. That's a lawyer crowd. That's an entrepreneurial crowd. That's, even within that upper crust, there are still distinct crowds. There are still distinct groups and parties, and there are vacation spots, right? And there are even clubs for children. There are activities for children, like Jack and Jill. There's a Jack and Jill here in Northern Virginia, and a friend of mine told me she wanted to get her daughter in there, I remember she joked and told me that it really is for the moms. So if you look on, for example, if you follow Jack and Jill of Northern Virginia, which I do, because I think I went to one of their events or something, you see the moms in the pictures. You see the kids, you see the kids, but you see the moms there as well, cheesing it up, front and center, saluting each other, acknowledging each other. It's a lot for the parents as much as it is for the kids. So, and I think just the general takeaway from the book is that, well, going back to hierarchy and ranking systems, those of you in the chat, those of you from the YouTube streets, you know that that's a hot topic now. That's been a hot topic for the last 5 years. I think the image guy was at the forefront of that. But hierarchies, distinct classes, distinct sects of people, sex, SECTS, not SEX, distinct groups of people where some people have access and some people don't, where some people are accepted and some people are not, when some people, that's a part of us as a species, that's a part of us as a race, and it's always been there. Even if nobody's talking about it, it's always been there, and it probably always will be there. So I think that's one of the important takeaways from the book. And I think people, well, I don't want to say I think a lot of people struggle with that when they get their master's degree or their PhD or their terminal degree. But I think some people run into that, whether it's just wanting to mingle socially, or if you're talking about Ray Alexander's assortative mating, people run into that. And I think that this is my opinion. One of my favorite talk show hosts used to say, I'm the world's leading expert on my opinion, not in my opinion, on my opinion. No one knows more about my opinion than me. I think for kids of color, if they're going to pursue white collar education, I think this book is a must read. I think it's a must read so that they know. They know what fine dining is, and so that they know that these different groups, these different hierarchies, and these different subcultures are out there. Because if you go through and you don't know what these things are, you don't know what Martha's Vineyard is, you don't know what Idlewild is, if you don't know what the salad fork is and what your meat fork is, I don't even know if that's the right term for it, but if you don't know all these little things that reflect your polish, if you don't know what these things are, it's going to catch up with you later on, even if you are a PhD or someone with a terminal degree. I think that for young people pursuing white collar education, those who want to be doctors, those who want to be lawyers or whatever, I think that this book is a must read for them. Let me see what Shonda is saying. Shonda says, if people were to research the origins of the Boule, the majority of their founders were Black physicians and businessmen in 1904 when they came on the scene. Shonda, thank you for that. She says, oops, She says, Jack and Jill is less restrictive now on membership than it has traditionally been over the last 30 years, in my opinion. You know, Shonda, I also heard the church I attend here, the Alfred Street Baptist Church, which is one of the more popular churches here. I heard that it used to be very, very classist and very colorist as well. That's what I was told. So maybe some of these things are rolling back a little bit. But this is our history. This is a part of our history. It's not often told. It's not often celebrated by other parts of our race, but it's there. And if what we're hearing about the admixture and our ethnic group in this country being under attack and potentially going away, then passing on of this history is very, very, very important. Brian Edis says class as a concept of topic of discourse in the USA is verboten and yet supersedes race. So much so that most things ascribed to race are roundly a class issue, problem, or topic of discussion. Brian, I think you just taught me a new word. I'm not used to using verboten. Verboten. I think that means, I'm gleaning from the rest of the sentence, that it's a topic that's shunned upon. I know that in my house, in my home where I come from, I explained that I come from humble beginnings at Thanksgiving, at Christmas. My mom and the boomers, they don't, from my background, they don't really like it. They don't really like it. They don't understand it. My auntie Vani frequently refers to her daughter as Bougie. They don't understand it. But it's there. It's real. I'm going to drop the link. If anyone wants to come and say something really quickly, I'll hang out for another. Well, if someone wants to come up, I'll hang out for a little bit longer. But not too long. Yeah, whose job? Yeah, so whose job is it to teach history? So by the way, so Mrs. Williams and Miss Van Sant, Alonso, give me a second. I've when I go back over my blog, I realize how much stuff I wrote. I've written a lot of stuff. Even just explaining the difference between white collar and blue collar. My Father's Day 2018 essay, I talked about this. My father wanted me to be his lawyer, and he wanted my brother to be his medical doctor. But the other parts surrounding that were not explained. You're going to have to go to school for this long. You might have to take out debt to do it. When you come out, you're going to be a white collar, high income professional. And these are going to be the social expectations associated with those careers. So the prestige, because I think my father and those in his cohort, they're enamored with the prestige, but they're not privy to what all comes with those degrees and those careers. All right. Let me ask some guests backstage. I'll hang out for just a little bit longer.
Dapper Dunbar, salute.
Salute.
We here, Sauchi the Equalizer. How we doing, gentlemen? Wanted to be real brief, but definitely in terms of class and levels, well, it's something that Rael says often is family is business and business is family. And that's very prevalent, even in the mixing, like you were saying, in things like the selection of whom you mate with or what they are being prepped for. Prime example, a lot of people often say, the Cosbys is not likely to happen. uh, which is odd to me. For example, when I met my wife, we met online. She lived in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to Bed-Stuy. But when I got there, the block that she lived on was wealthy black people. Like I said, her mother worked for Morgan Stanley. Uh, father worked for Columbia University. We had, attorneys, district attorney, the assistant district attorney of Brooklyn lived on this block, and these were all black professionals. So the, the BMW that was sitting outside belonged there because you knew they owned the home. Um, Unlike, when we usually see someone who looks like us in certain areas with, an $80,000 vehicle, we're like, how are you doing that? But you're living rent control. Um, so even if you can, and I think that causes confusion in today's world between the upper crust class of our people and that aren't, because of access to things as such. Um, Prime example is the question that was asked to you of, hey, the kind of car you drive. Now, for me, it makes sense to pull up in a BMW because I'm a sales guy, right? So I have to have a certain look. But as you mentioned, your professor, and it's ironic because I do that now. I wear jeans and a t-shirt, but all my t-shirts are Calvin Klein, right? But, I also wear a pair of black New Balances and a pair of jeans with holes in them. I'm not going out there flashy. And it's even evidenced by things like Jay-Z. When he was worth 100,000, he had all these chains on. Look at him now. You might see a ring. And I'll stop there.
Okay, I think Sheed was next.
Well, basically coming up, just listening to the conversation about the book and everything. I did a little research on it, and I was always familiar with a lot of these things in the background. Talking about the Jack and Jill, I heard about those, organizations, and my family they would always talk about a different class of, us as black people, that we don't participate in certain things, we don't move according that way and this way. And even though we wasn't a part of that class, the point of it is it never stopped like most people within our family from carrying that type of respect for ourselves and the way we move as well. Like I said, prime example, I was always speaking on my great grandma when she would implement us having life insurance not being a burden to people. So there were things that we kind of took upon the bourgeois class and the way we carry ourselves. When I was younger, we would set the table, forks and stuff to that degree. But it came down to a point it was mostly at holidays where you had to eat a certain way and teach the kids to eat properly at the table, no elbows and having manners and napkins and things of that nature. So we kind of grew up younger that way, but as the older generation passed on, those values, if they're not kept and kept going, then it kind of loses touch. But I'm gonna go ahead and let someone else get in.
I think Sachi was next.
Yeah, good evening. It's like anything else, really. Is it's a subculture, but it's everything's intentional. It's about refinement. It's about grace. It's about being, discreet. And when I say intentional, I mean virtually every way. Your health, your education, your career, your income, uh, obviously your mate, your family, the next generation. Like it's planned and it's passed down. So where, especially in these spaces where you see a lot of issues, is that people, especially from the outside, they typically only pick one aspect. Oh, they're only about just the money, or oh, they're only just about skinny or fit looking women. They'll say things of that sort. Or oh, they're only about whether or not you went to college or what college. but really it's a holistic way of looking at things. So I don't really get into those arguments, but whenever I hear it, I never hear anyone speaking that it's really in a holistic way of life. And again, I'm not saying whether you should do it, not do it. I'm just saying that it is what it is. Amongst mammals, there are natural hierarchies. So obviously, we are mammals, and the same goes with us as well. So it just breeds a lot of contempt and a lot of anger from those who are not obviously who aren't quote unquote in. But that it doesn't matter because you see that at the supposed lower economic level, lower educational level, you see it on all levels anyway. But again, in the upper class or elite class, they're just very intentional about everything that they're doing. I mean, in my opinion, it's pretty simple. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think I'm gonna give it to Ray. But I think, yeah, this book, this principle, it resonates with people. Keep coming back to this video. It's not the highest quality video I've ever created, but I think the topic, something about it, is resonating with people. So, which means that I think a lot of folks are encountering this in some way, and that's probably why some people have thanked me underneath that video for creating the video on the topic, because some people are just, if their parents don't know, they can't tell them. And so
Correct.
you move to a quote unquote NFL city, and there are these circles and these hierarchies, and she won't talk to you because of this, or you can't get access to that, and I don't know why.
I saw that even within my family, growing up. But see, I wasn't privy up until I got older. My parents didn't really tell me. Like, I knew about my background, but they didn't really give like the details. If I had known like what I know now, I would most likely be a whole different person. I would be in a whole different stratosphere if I had known. Like, I shared online, well, not within our emails, like last week, like my background on both sides of my family. Like, if people knew like my background, they would wonder. But I don't like to get into the details. Like, I walk around because the way I was raised was like not to, what the people in the past have accomplished, those are not your accomplishments. So that's my mentality. So now that I'm older and now knowing what they've accomplished some stuff on like a grand scale on both sides of my family. So like, I could be an a-hole and like use that, because a lot of people do that and use that as an excuse to, walk around with my chest up. But again, in those upper, echelon, spaces, that's not how it works.
Ray Alexander, what say you on this topic?
Greetings. Hello, Dr. Dunbar and all the members of the chat family and the panel. This is a great topic. I enjoy hearing about it. One of the things that I'm kind of concerned is, and maybe the panelists can discuss this, why there's a resistance, usually social upward mobility and getting to a higher socioeconomic status is a goal for people, but there seems to be a resistance of kind of keeping it real about, even when they get money. Some of the things that kind of have hijacked the Black upper class culture is that when the rappers and the different people in the entertainment industry, they get a lot of money, but they still want to be down with the gold chains and a lot of the thug life culture, or the children all over the place unmarried, and they don't really raise their children, in my view, to take over those industries or to go and, emulate the white elite by going to the same elite schools with them, getting those law degrees, getting a lock on the law industry, things like the NFL being 70% Black, but maybe having less than 5% Black agents. The music industry, we're still one of the most productive in those areas, even since Berry Gordy, but creative artist agencies and a lot of the white agencies dominate the artist and things like that. But I was just curious about, when I grew up in Houston, some of the people I met I went to some programs because I was a little bit political, but the kids that were from the Jack and Jill set, they went to the private college prep schools. They were oriented toward high status careers like medicine, law. They went to, if they went to Morehouse and Howard, it's because their father went there, the mother went there, and they were very, as the Equalizer says, intentional. A lot of the women that I knew, the young ladies that I knew I met them in college that were in the sororities like second generation. They were focused on the guys that went to college prep schools because they knew that those guys would go to Rice, they would go to Duke, and they would succeed. Then they'd go to med school and they would have a nice life with them. But I was wondering if the guys could speak on the panel. Why is the lower middle class, the blue collar lower middle class, or the working class not really, is there some resistance about the economic and social mobility acclimating to the upper class culture?
I think it's pretty obvious that it's a subculture. You're looking at some, people, groups of people from a different subculture, and we have these habits that are ingrained in us. So change is one of the potentially the hardest thing for a human being to partake in. So when you see someone who is above you or ahead of you, and they have the same, hue as you do, they may feel a certain way. They have to look in the mirror now, and now that questions their identity, and that's a very daunting thing for a human being. Period. It doesn't matter, your race or nationality. That's a daunting thing to partake in, and you have to rewire, your brain. You have to expand your worldview intentionally. You have to change your environment. So that means leaving people behind. So that's why there's so much pushback. One, it's foreign, and two, you have to put in so much work, whether it could be physically, one is mentally, emotionally, physically, and obviously within your career via education, and your income is literally a different way of life. So you're having various subcultures clashing because they're not in the same subculture. They're looking at things from a different perspective. And those who are lower, again, it can be extremely daunting to improve yourself. It is what it is.
Well, I think also going to Miss Williams and Miss Van Zant, the whole better than thing is probably hurtful to some people. Yeah. Feeling like you're not good enough, feeling like, why am I not good the way that I am, or why am I just not accepted as I am? Yeah. So hierarchies, ranking, not being accepted, I think that is hurtful to some people. Brian, you dropped off. If you want to come back, I was going to pass it to you next.
Well, in the interim, what Sachi mentions is very true in terms of the being alone when you climb, especially as a Black professional. Right. One of our favorite entertainers, Jay-Z, said there's less and less Blacks the higher I go. And then I also recall working with an elite financial advisor who's a white guy by the name of David Kinder. And he's an MDRT qualifier. Saucham, I don't know if you're familiar with MDRT, Million Dollar Round Table. Top 1% of financial professionals across 75 countries. So he sent me a Yahoo Finance article And he said he wanted to take me under his wing. The Yahoo Finance article stated that if you have MDRT qualified Caucasian advisors and they see Black advisors who are of the same cloth, they should take them under their wing, because unfortunately, generally Black advisors aren't going to come from wealth. So it's hard to, do a job like this when your customers aren't wealthy. But so it harkens to the fact that there's that fear of, wow, well, when I go up, there's really, we always worry about the lack of support from our own. But then when we go up the hierarchy, there's even more of a lack of support from everyone else. So, I'll evidence that with everyone's exclaiming that Kanye West should just, well, you shouldn't, worry about you should just go make your own Yeezys. Like, $11 billion is enough to compete against a probably $1 trillion company in Adidas. And I'll stop there.
Okay, Brian?
Yes, sir. Thanks for letting me share. Exciting conversation. It's very coincidental because Mr. Hall and I were speaking about this earlier. I was saying to him that, many years ago, I used to volunteer for Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Push Coalition in New York. And, I had the chance to meet a lot of well-heeled, well-to-do Black Americans. And, you find that people of any color, once they've made it to a certain point, especially if they're born into a lifestyle, they hold themselves in a different way from people of the same color but of a different class. And just because we, as I say, we skin folk, but we ain't kin folk, right? And I was born in the United States. I grew up in Trinidad, and I came back in 1990 to go to Rutgers. And the thing that I've noticed, in Trinidad, race is an issue everywhere, but to varying degrees depending on where in the world. Trinidad is more of a class thing, because if you're black, white, whatever, you have a certain amount of money. But if you're just kind of cool and you fit in, and it's no problem. And I found coming to the States, the same dynamic was here, but the difference is the power structure, the hierarchy set things up such that class is not. People don't really get class as a topic. It exists, but it's not. It doesn't exist conceptually. So people are so busy. Everything is race, and I'm like, no, that actually has nothing to do with race. That's more of a class thing. But they don't really get that as a concept. And I remember many years ago, I watched the film. I think it was Deep Cover with Lawrence Fishburne and Jeff Goldblum, and. Lawrence Fishburne was an undercover agent working with against Jeff Goldblum, who was trying to synthesize some kind of drug. So there's a scene where Jeff Goldblum is talking to this Mexican guy, and the Mexican says, "How can I trust you? You're white, not Mexican." He says, "Listen, you're rich, I'm rich, we're on the same side." And then that moment, something clicked in my mind for me that to this day I get, that it doesn't matter your color. If you are and I have the same class, color is completely secondary, if not tertiary. And if you think about it, think of 9/11, right? As soon as that happened, all the bin Laden family and all the Saudis, the Bushes and the powers that be, let them leave the country, right? Why is that? Because the Bushes have more in common with the rich Saudis and the bin Laden family than they have with even other white people, and definitely black folk, right? So when you put that all together, right, that gives, I feel, a more nuanced version of view of how life really is. Just one other point I would like to make. You mentioned Tavis Smiley. I remember seeing Gay Talese on Tavis Smiley many years ago, and he was talking about how the difference, I think it was him, the difference between a melting pot and a rainbow. So people talk about the rainbow, but if you think about it, what is a rainbow? The colors start separately and they end separately. A melting pot, everything melts together. Trinidad is a melting pot. The Caribbean is a melting pot. America is a rainbow. People tolerate each other. They don't like each other here, but they tolerate each other. And until people start to intermingle and intermarry, and so on and so forth, those mental barriers and that distrust of the other will never go away. It doesn't matter how much social engineering you try to do. right? Unless it happens organically, those barriers will always be there because it's just hardwired from evolutionary biology into the human. You know, we're primates, so we're all designed to live in troops and to be suspicious of others, and that's just kind of how it is. There's nothing. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just biology. So, thanks for letting me share. I appreciate your time.
Wow, thank you for that, Brian. That was very insightful. Okay.
Long-winded as ever, brother. Long-winded as ever.
Hey, that's me.
Well, gentlemen, I'll let this go a little bit longer. Do you guys have anything else? I'm gonna
I
wrap
did
this
want
up.
to add something, if you don't mind, and then throw it out to
Right.
the panel. There was some really great insights, Brian. One of the things that I'm going to just ask the question. Say, for instance, if all of the gentlemen on the panel were married and you developed a business that made you a millionaire, and then you had a son and a daughter, and you were able to put resources together to get them to a nice private school. You were living in an upper middle class neighborhood. You got to travel to Europe and different places and expose them to a lot. And then your son got into West Point, then went to Harvard Law. Your daughter got into Wellesley, and then got a marketing degree from Northwestern. Now, we're going to, I'll say we're doing both. Would you be open as a father if, quote, since this is thing, if a really nice, hardworking bus driver with a high school diploma, nicest guy, really had a great heart, wanted to marry your daughter?
To be honest, I think I definitely have to think twice about that. My feeling is, you know, if I invest in my own life and I aspire to go up the hierarchy, go up the ladder, and to find, you know, maybe a wife of my own when I hit that level who shares the same values and that background, I would want to keep the family going in that direction. You know, you could call it elitist. I do not think elitist is a pejorative, right? Yes, I do aspire to better. You're damn right, because guess what? It's survival. The more I have, it means I survive better, longer, at a higher level, and I ensure that my offspring have better than I did and my parents before me. So, you know, people can be as judgmental as they would like to be, but I'm very straightforward. I would have a problem with that. And again, you know, I'm not at any high level myself, to be honest, to be clear. But if I ever got to a higher level, I put work in to get there. So to me, it would almost be a step back to do all that and then to go, yeah, no problem. Let's go backwards. So, hey, that's just how I feel. You know,
Well, again, environment is very important, right? So of course I think it would be harder with the daughter because of the environment, right? The environment, especially these days, is way bigger than we are. And they're basically pushing them to definitely not be the best versions of themselves. So in that scenario, she's most likely definitely not even gonna see that guy. Like, I mean, let's be real. On any level, he would be invisible for the most part. I mean, of course, I would want her to, you know, pick the best guy in terms of, you know, health and, intellect and all that. But, you know, the environment is really most likely going to have more of an impact on her. And I know this just from in my family. The majority of my family's not even born here, and they come from some stuff. Okay, and I can tell you one, sister. She wasn't even born. The oldest, she wasn't even born here, so she really saw stuff that we didn't see and experienced it. And the guys that she chose, and the guys she chose to, marry and have a child with, and divorce, and the boyfriend she got now is nothing like my father, nothing like my grandfather. I mean, the complete opposite. And I see that quite frequently. So, I would want the best, but the environment is strong.
Well, for me, I would say hypothetically, if I was in that position, I know today it's about individual choice. You can't control someone. You can't control what your daughter does. You can't control what your son does. I would do the best I could to provide wise counsel and try to explain all this stuff early so that she and he has an understanding of it when they get to that age. If you don't know, if you don't know that if you don't you don't know the difference between white collar and blue collar, you're gonna make the decisions oftentimes based upon what you know. Now, I do like what Dr. Shauna ATN said, which was that some of those guys, the bus drivers, the policemen, some of those guys are wise with their money and they acquire properties and they make sound decisions. I think that's important. So that's telling me that this is a little bit more nuanced than whether or not he's a bus driver, and that's it. But I would, going back to the original question, I would try to provide wise counsel, and as early as possible, try to start explaining these things. Cheat Alonzo?
So, you want to go ahead or?
He's unmuted, but I don't know if he's
They
saying
might have
anything.
got him.
All right, well, go ahead, Alonzo.
All right. So, as one of the only two married men up here, I believe, there is, Dr. Dunbar, a lot of nuance to it. Especially.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, you could go ahead.
No, oh, go ahead. I go after you unless you want me
All
to.
right. So there is a lot of nuance to it. One of the things that I always talk about is vetting. And so you have to vet the family, right? So in terms of that, you must vet him. So I have to get to know him and what he's about. Is he a person who's making wise decisions, thinking about the future? You know, did he get this job? Does he know about, the fact that he's a municipal worker and gets great retirement? Sachi, I'm sure there's a joke on the street. Way more millionaires in overalls and construction boots than fancy cars and shiny suits, right? It's the lifeblood of the country. We just don't think of it like that. There are actually a boatload of 401k millionaires, right? I literally just talked to some old dude who like worked in retail his whole life. He's in his 70s, but he has $2 million in his 401k, right? Literally working in retail, so it's possible. You just have to make sound decisions. And the reason I say vetting the family is, again, very similar to the book. A person may fall from the tree. However, the entire tree may not be bad, right? So you have to look at that family tree, right? What's the history, right? My family history was a certain way. My wife's family's history is a certain way. Um, a lot of the people are college graduates and work in certain fields. And, yes, some of us decided to maintain hood richness because, you got to be blackety black too still. So, there is a hard line to toe there. But I would definitely say you have to do a lot of vetting initially. So, knee-jerk reaction, no. But the reality is, again, there is a lot of nuance, and it is a free world. But also, that Carlton may not have, because he was a trust fund baby, may not have been paying attention in class because Daddy's dollars always got him through, and Daddy's social connections always got him ushered through. So when it came time for him to actually use that economics degree, he ended up being, Bernie Madoff #2, right? And now that's worse off for not only your daughter, but your family as a whole, because now your daughter has taken on his name, so there's that blending of the family. again, like Rael says, family is business and business is family. I mention these names all the time. The Morgans. J.P. Morgan Chase is the grandfather of Henry Sturgis Morgan. J.P. Morgan Chase, Chase Bank, Henry Sturgis Morgan, Morgan Stanley Smith Barney Dean Witter bought your mama's house last week. I'll pause there.
Well, before I go to Sheed, so shout out to Malcolm Gladwell and Outliers. Too much advantage can be crippling. So that yeah, if a child doesn't learn how to work and grind, and yeah, that could be crippling as well. So Sheed, we'll hear your comment and then I'll wrap this up. Oh, the other thing, Alonzo, what you spoke to is that I think more so than before, this dawned on me, with so many people moving away. It used to be like families grew up together and kind of stayed in the same area, but now with all this moving, which you described in terms of vetting families and just thinking about that, I don't think that that's as prevalent as it used to be.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to do today.
Yeah. Well, basically, it's more around the company you keep. I mean, starting off with both of my kids, my son and daughter, you can only raise them but so much. You know, I always say there's kids raising kids. I can teach my kids how to be professional, do everything right. And when they socialize with their friends, if they're not in that type of environment, private school, and, needless to say, they have bad kids in private school to a point where they're going to go with the wind. So nowadays, these younger girls are wanting to date these guys that don't have as much money, even though, they're from a different class. It's upon the entertainment they see, the friendship and stuff around them, that wants a regular guy to be down to earth. Or the women that do date within that certain class of guys, they're the ones that's going to college and pursuing these guys at a degree. But needless to say, if my daughter was to date a man like that, and I pretty much would be fine with it, because due to the premise of me seeing what type of man he is. If this guy comes from a certain class, I'll judge him on that, but more or less the way he carries himself, the way he's humble, and he could be just a regular bus driver that, pulling it, well, I won't say pull himself by a bootstrap, but to a degree, just being an average man, as long as he has certain characteristics, hey, I can always welcome into the family, give him a better job. In most cases, typically you can't vet the family like that, because most families are broken. So to a degree, in that guy's situation, the character he presents to me, and I see, he's honest and truthful with it, I'll walk him into the family and possibly get him to the point of actually owning the company, or owning a company, to that degree, because that will benefit my daughter. So as long as this man has good character, and things that represent himself and values that a so-called man that has that status represents, I can deal with the rest because I have money.
Okay.
Can I also share my answer before you close out on that, Dr. Dunbar?
Sure, Ray. This will be the last
Thank
one.
you a bunch on that. One of the things that I have noticed, and I kind of am in line with Brian that was speaking earlier, we cannot, I would socialize my children to date and marry within their social class. Sometimes I think that we look at that exception to the rule, and maybe some of the Tyler Perry movies or the Disney movies about the exceptions, but the rule is, if you give them those tools and they're intelligent people, they do it. And there was a book that came out way back called The Power Elite, or even if you look at that book written by Charles Murray, where he talks about the college sorting of wealth, marriage, and wealth. People have done this a long time, where they go to certain schools, they mate there. Maybe we have done it less, maybe the Black elite has done it. But if you give them that information and you're raising them, then they'll tend to follow that, because they know, and as you're showing them the world, and they'll know how privileged they are. A lot of times the athletes and entertainers are not a good example, but the people that have built these businesses, they're showing their children if they built apartment complexes, they're an architects that design things, and their children are going to see what they've designed, these hospitals and schools, and they see these neighborhoods and transforming, and they find themselves at Exeter Academy or St. Albans or St. Mark's or some of these premier college prep schools, or if it even is a day school like Woodward Academy, they will recognize that they are privileged and that it's honorable. And that's why people go to Martha's Vineyard regularly, to come in contact with other people of like mind. That's why people go to their alumni association. The Greek letter organizations are all having their annual meetings. People go there. And now that the people from the working class, I think we are all, that's where I started from as well, are very idealistic. And we want to think that a person could, and of good character, but I would not recommend my daughter. She would be raised to this such a degree that she understands it. And I live in a suburb that's 20% Asian. And these people from India, that's how they do it. They do not play. You're not coming to, and the big brother will be the heavy. He will make sure that a well-qualified guy with equal, because a lot of Indian women are doctors, dentists. Or he will make sure, and it's usually not the father. The brother will come and say, "Oh no, you're not really qualified for," and they'll say that you're not qualified for my sister. So don't come around here doing these things. But that's how I would do it. But I think this was it's going to be one of your hot topics, Dr. Dunbar. I really enjoyed this. I had put it on notifications so I wouldn't miss you, so I could call in and hang out with you.
Well, Ray, I know this is your your sweet spot, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just want to come back and I noticed this video. It keeps in my backstage. People keep watching this, so I thought it would be cool to revisit it here. All right, gentlemen, I need to wrap up. It's at 2 hours. Thank you for coming up. So, Brian, thank you for subscribing. There's a lot of movie and TV stuff over here. So,
You're welcome.
So just
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
okay. Just FYI.
Thanks for having us, Doc.
Thank you,
All right,
Doc. Take care.
Take care. All right, everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. If you're new to the channel, please like, share, and subscribe if you want to donate something. That information is, well, it's here. Please consider joining the Big Words LLC newsletter. In addition to being a YouTube content creator, I'm also a writer with 2 blogs and a book project on the way. There's a 2-paragraph greeting, and you just hit that subscribe button and it takes you there. You just enter in your email address and you're a part of the club. And yeah, please consider joining. The link is here. And with that, yeah, I'm gonna wrap up. All right, everyone. Yeah, if you're watching the playback, once again, yeah, please smash that like button. Please subscribe. I haven't done book related content in a while, but the time came to revisit this as people are still watching the original video. So it'll be interesting to see if people are drawn to this one as well. By the way, I did see someone put in the underneath the previous video, the first one, that the TV series was not renewed. My favorite character was Nadine Ellis's character. I started watching, but I didn't follow that long. After a while, I just stopped. It was just a big soap opera. So anyway, everyone, enjoy the rest of your night. Enjoy the rest of your night. If you haven't read this book, consider it, especially if you have a young person in the pipeline to go off to college. One quick story. I remember I talked about Buffalo and Brockport and JC Smith in Charlotte and Michigan and what I experienced there. Before I came to DC, I stopped in Albany, New York to do my postdoc. And there was their caucus. New York State has a Hispanic and Black caucus weekend, much like they have the CDC annual legislative conference here. And there was a woman I saw one night who I was interested in. And I remember I went over and said hi. And the first thing she told me was, "Don't you know that I'm a lawyer? I'm a lawyer." So I didn't respond, "I'm a doctor." I went home and told my dad about it. But that's real. Titles, hierarchies, social class, oftentimes you may be confronted with that from someone right away. Just FYI. Anyway, everyone stay safe out there. As always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Always try to do your best. Take care, and I will talk to you the next time. Bye-bye.